Hi there, Ken and Danny here, and this is part 2 of adjusting the height of our handlebar and our headset. In this part we're going to be talking about threadless headset and with the aluminum steering tube. So basically we've got the same system like in the good old one, the threaded system, which means that we've got two bearings, the lower bearing and the upper bearing, and some system that will compress those bearings, making sure that there is no play, everything works smooth, fine, and enables us to steer, actually, to turn our wheel. How it works? Well, we've got here, this is of course the lefty, which has only one leg, but doesn't matter for us. It also has the steering tube just as any other forks with the aluminum steering tube would have. So we have the top cap here with the bolt. We've got a stem. This, what stands out here, this is the steering tube. This one is the aluminum one. And if we look inside, we see some anchor there. So we just put the anchor inside by a little bit of hammering. So when you buy a bike, it's of course already there inside. And how it works now, we should understand how this system works, because in some tutorials on YouTube I've seen people saying that we should periodically tighten the bolt without doing anything with the bolts that assemble our stem into the steering tube, which is very, very wrong. It can damage your fork, it can actually lead to an injury. So how it works? Well, let's just start from the beginning. Let's say that the bike is assembled and we want to take the fork off. We need those hex keys. In this particular bike I would use a 4mm hex key for these bolts, assembling the stem to the steering tube, and a 5mm for the top cap. So how it works? First we will unbolt those here, and then we can take this bolt off by just unscrewing it. So just as shown at the beginning of this video, you can then freely take the fork off, and you may also take your fork off the frame. When assembling this headset, we'll do it in this order. When we have the anchor already in our steering tube, we will just tighten this bolt. All right. Now, in order to check whether our bolt holding the top cap is tightened enough, we can break the front wheel and check whether the bearings, the upper bearing and the lower bearing, have any play. Just don't worry that this is a lefty system. If you have just the standard fork, it will work out for you well. And now when there is no play, but also no friction in the bearings, you can freely turn the wheel. It means that it's fine, but sometimes you won't be able to check it enough just with your hands, because then you go out riding, and when you hit some bumps, you can hear some tick in your headset, and that means you should be tighten it a little bit more. So some would say that we can tighten the headset a little bit more, so that we can start feeling some friction, and then go back just a little bit in order to get rid of the friction in the bearings. So when they are working freely, that's fine. So now I'm ready to tighten the bolts that will assemble the stem to the steering tube. I'm gonna use another key in this particular bike, a 4mm. I will do it evenly for both sides, the upper and the lower bolt. It's also on the other side in the stem. All right, and it's done. No play, we don't hear any play, no friction, it's just fine. So the main thing we should understand here is that bolt on the top cap is only compressing the bearings against the head tube, so that we don't have any play in the bearings. But what really assembles all the parts together are the bolts on the stem. So when the stem is assembled to the steering tube of our fork, then we are good to go. Now the handlebar height, because we know how to assemble this system, but what about if we want to adjust the height? In some bikes here on the steering tube we would have some spacers, and now by putting those spacers either over the stem or under the stem, we will be able to adjust the height of the stem. Some spacers I can show you here, you can see. So if I take this stem off the steering tube and put those spacers just below, I'm gonna have higher position, more upright position, and if you've got these spacers in your bike, you will be able to adjust the height. Sometimes you may want to get rid of some of the spacers, like I'm gonna be getting rid of here, because just, you see, this steering tube is too long for me, and I'm gonna cut it and then throw away some of the spacers. There's one thing we have to remember about, and it is that the stem should be slightly over the steering tube, because once again, when we have our top cap here, it has to push against the stem, not against our steering tube. So the calendar says, for example, 2 or 3 millimeters stem should be higher than the steering tube, and then it's okay, because as you can see, the top cap will be compressing a whole system because of that difference. All right? That's basically it. If you've got more questions, just put them below the video. I'm waiting for you there. And in the part 3, I'm gonna show you how it looks like with the carbon steering tube of our fork.